I called off my wedding after my fiancé allowed kids, but banned my daughter, blaming her for ruining our engagement party by being ill earlier this week. Addison 40F and I 38M were about to tie the knot, but I abruptly called it off. For the previous 3 years we had been together, and everything was going well until we got engaged, which was around 6 months ago. That's when we started talking about who we wanted to invite to the wedding, and things began to go south. Naturally, I wanted my daughter to be present because I have one. Addison, however, was very clear that she did not want any children at the wedding, given that she has 2 children of her own from a previous marriage and 6 nieces and nephews with whom she is very close. This put me in an odd position, especially considering that the majority of those we invited were also parents. I couldn't understand why she didn't want any children at the wedding. At first, we argued about it a lot, but I finally gave in. I grudgingly agreed to keep my daughter away from the wedding, provided she didn't invite any children from her side of the family. To put things into perspective, my daughter is 14 years old. She's not even a little child. However, Addison was unaffected by that. She informed me that she wanted a stress-free wedding and didn't want any exceptions. Even though she loved my daughter, her own children, and even her nieces and nephews, I was really angry about it, but I reasoned that since she had already made up her mind, there wasn't much I could do. If she really wanted a wedding without children, I would have to accept that. The actual wedding was going to be small, just a few close friends and family would be coming, and we would be getting married in my parents' backyard. I decided to let it go after reasoning that the kids wouldn't be missing out on much fun. But just a few days prior to the wedding, everything changed. Kate, Addison's younger sister, emailed me while I was at work. She was requesting approval for the email, which included pictures of her 2 daughters wearing wedding-appropriate attire. I was initially perplexed. Then I saw that Kate had sent the email to our shared wedding email address, which we had set up especially for vendor communications and RISPs. It was too late when I realized it must have been an accident. I had previously viewed and captured a screenshot of the email, and when I tried to check it again a few minutes later, Addison had already erased it. By that point, I had finally figured out what was going on. Addison had claimed that there would be no children at the wedding, but in reality, she was planning to invite her own children as well as her relatives and nephews, just not my daughter. I was incensed at her dishonesty. That day I didn't say anything, but as soon as I got home from work, I acted as though nothing was wrong. Addison was being a little odd at first, perhaps because she thought I had read the email and figured out what she was doing. However, she calmed down and resumed her typical behavior once I kept everything a secret. I knew she was planning something behind my back, and this was around 2 days before the wedding. I therefore made the decision to ask my daughter about her feelings on Addison. Even before I proposed, I had discussed Addison with her, but since I was reconsidering the wedding, I felt it would be best to have another conversation. In retrospect, I'm really happy I took that step. My daughter told me that Addison had always been kind to her prior to the engagement, but after that something had changed. My daughter clarified that she hadn't brought it up sooner because she didn't want to spoil my happiness with Addison. After witnessing Addison's behavior, however, she felt it wasn't right. Addison had been acting strangely toward her after the engagement. When I wasn't around, Addison ignored her. Prior to the engagement, this wasn't the case, and it was unexpected and disheartening to hear. My daughter also revealed that she thought Addison no longer wanted her in her life. When she learned that the wedding was going to be child-free, she believed it wouldn't matter, so she didn't even try to go. I felt so bad about myself for letting Addison convince me not to invite my own kid to my wedding. I made the decision to call off the wedding at that point. I talked to Addison the day before the wedding. After that, I didn't bother returning home. Addison called me multiple times, but I didn't answer. I told my parents to inform her that I would meet her on the wedding day, because I knew she would get in touch with them next. I stayed with my daughter all day instead of returning home. By the end of the day, we both felt much better. I spent the night at a hotel after dropping her off at her mother's house. The following morning, I arrived at my parents' house exactly 1 hour before the ceremony was set to start. A few people had already arrived, including Addison's dad and both of her sisters, Kate and Amelia. Naturally, all 6 of their children were present, along with Addison's 2 children, who were all under 12 and running around the area. Addison hurried to meet me at the door. As soon as she noticed me, she started by saying that Kate and Amelia couldn't leave their children behind despite her having informed them that the wedding was child-free. She went on to say that her parents thought it would be odd if she married without her own children being there. I could tell she thought I was crazy because she was making up all these absurd excuses. However, I remained silent until she had finished speaking. Then she began asking me strange questions, like where I had been the night before, and why I was dressed the way I was. I simply got out my phone, showed her a screenshot of the email that Kate had inadvertently sent to our joint wedding email account, and laughed in her face. That was sufficient to silence her. She realized right away that she had been apprehended and couldn't get away with it by talking. It was already too late when she began to apologize. I informed her that I had spent the day before with my daughter and discovered that she had been treating my daughter differently for the past few months ever since we became engaged. I didn't even want an explanation or an answer at this point. I simply informed her that we were done. She clearly did not value my daughter, and I made it clear that I would not marry her. I had never treated her children any differently than I had my own, so it was very painful. However, I didn't believe it was a good idea for us to get married because it was obvious that she didn't really value my family or me. I spoke up and didn't wait for her to answer. I simply left. I didn't turn around, even though she was shouting for me. I had nothing better to do, so I got into my car, drove to a hotel, and napped for a long time. My phone was inundated with texts. When I got up at lunchtime, Addison's family was unhappy, and everyone who had been invited to the wedding was perplexed. However, I was unable to care. I gave my friends and family a quick rundown of the circumstances and then let it go. I visited my daughter later and informed her that I intended to spend more time with her and that I had canceled the wedding. I acknowledged that without even recognizing it, we had begun to drift apart during the previous few months. She used to come to me right away if she had a problem with someone, so I realized something was wrong. She hadn't spoken to me about Addison. At least we were able to work things out, even if we were both a little emotional. Speaking of Addison, that's where I've been having trouble. 5 days have passed since the day we were meant to tie the knot, and by now almost everyone is aware of the reason I called off the wedding. Her dishonesty was just as much of a factor as the way she treated my daughter. Being dishonest, in my opinion, is a major deal breaker in any relationship. I've already been cheated on twice, and I can tell you that it always begins with a simple fib. She believed that she could get away with telling such a large falsehood. I don't believe that canceling the wedding at the last minute was incorrect on my part. Yes, it was sudden and rude, but considering that she had intended to surprise me with the kids at the last minute, I believe it was reasonable. Her family feels I'm being harsh and is angry that I didn't offer her an opportunity to clarify. Addison has been contacting me constantly, as has the rest of her family. Addison's only justification is that she had good reason to invite my kid but couldn't beg me to come. She also finds it quite offensive that I didn't think our relationship needed at least a chat before terminating it in that manner, even after we had been together for so long. She has stated that she will discuss her reasons in person, but she has not disclosed them yet. How she could possibly defend her decision to not invite my daughter to our wedding is beyond me. To the best of my knowledge, she and my daughter have never had any problems together. I still believe I ought to have talked to her first, though. I've been feeling guilty for the past few days, and I'm not sure why. I believe that, rather than acting as though everything was all right up until the last minute, I should have been honest with her. I should have gone straight home from work and addressed her the day I learned what was planned. I could have prevented a lot of the drama that is going on now if I had done that. I've been bothered by the fact that I feel like a bit of a jerk for not handling things better. Am I the jerk for abruptly calling off the wedding and not talking to my fiancé first? Update: it's been 3 days since I made the decision to call off the wedding, and I'll admit that I've been feeling a mix of emotions. It was a hard choice to make, but I feel more confident in my decision with each passing day. I'm still at the motel where I've been staying, but I've finally had time to reflect on everything that happened, and I feel a lot clearer about my choices. I had to reach out to Addison today. I didn't want to have to do it, but it was necessary. I texted her earlier and told her that she needed to leave my house immediately. I know it might sound cold, but this was my place before she moved in, and I can't keep going back and forth on it. We're done, and it's time for her to go. I gave her until the end of the month to find somewhere else to stay, but I'm not sure I even owe her that much. At this point, I'm beyond concerned about how uncomfortable this is for her. It's hard, and I'm not proud of the situation, but I'm looking out for myself and my daughter, and that's all that matters now. When I told her this, I didn't expect her to take it well, and of course, she didn't. She was upset as I expected, but I'm tired of her playing games with me. Addison's actions have made it so that I have no sympathy left for her, even though we spent 3 years together. I think we both knew deep down that it wasn't right, but I kept trying to convince myself that it would work out. I was wrong. It's been a difficult few days. I've been reflecting a lot on what went wrong. I won't lie, a part of me regrets how sudden everything was. I wish I had been more upfront with Addison sooner. But then again, I don't think I could have predicted that things would turn out this way. Maybe I should have caught onto her intentions earlier when I started to notice small signs how she had begun treating my daughter differently. The truth is there were a lot of red flags, but I ignored them in favor of trying to keep the peace and make things work. I didn't want to stir up unnecessary drama, especially when we had already made all these plans. But I should have listened to my daughter when she told me how she was feeling. After I told Addison she had to leave, I spent some time with my daughter. I'm so glad I did that. Being with her and seeing how she was holding up made me realize just how important it is to focus on her. I could tell she was feeling a lot of relief too, like she could finally breathe again. She didn't say much, but her body language told me everything I needed to know. There's something powerful about the way she trusted me enough to tell me how she really felt about Addison, especially when I had been too blind to see it myself. I've never been more grateful for my daughter's honesty. She's the one person in my life who has always been straightforward, and I think that's one of the things I cherish most about our relationship. I've been reflecting a lot on my past relationships too, especially my previous marriages. The truth is I've been cheated on before, and I've had my heart broken in ways that I never thought I would recover from. The whole situation with Addison brought up a lot of those old feelings, but this time I'm handling it better. I realize now that I'm not willing to sacrifice my integrity or my family for anyone, no matter how much I may have loved them. Addison's decision to be dishonest with me, her disregard for my daughter's feelings, and her complete lack of transparency all made me realize that I deserve better. We both do. Even though it was a hard choice to make, I'm starting to see that I did the right thing. It's been incredibly liberating to let go of the idea of a perfect wedding and focus on what's really important. In hindsight, I don't think I could have gone through with the wedding even if I'd tried. Knowing that Addison didn't truly value my daughter, that she was willing to exclude her from something as significant as our wedding, was a huge deal breaker for me. I can't believe I even let it go this long. I've had time to think about how everything unfolded. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about trust, respect, and priorities. Addison put her own comfort and desires above what was best for me, and most importantly, a wedding isn't just a ceremony. It's about the people you choose to commit to, and that commitment is supposed to be unconditional. She didn't see that, and I realize now that this was her way of showing me where I stood in her life. I've been receiving messages from Addison's family and friends asking me why I made the decision I did, trying to explain things, but honestly, I don't care to hear it. Her excuses feel hollow to me now. I'm done listening to justifications for her actions. I gave her a chance to be honest with me, and she chose not to. I don't think there's anything else to talk about. In a strange way, I'm glad things ended the way they did. Sure, it was abrupt, but it was also clear. I didn't leave room for confusion or more lies. I don't want to keep second-guessing myself. I trust that I did the right thing, and I know that if I had ignored my instincts, things would have only gotten worse. I've come to realize something else during all of this. I've spent a lot of my life trying to please other people, trying to make sure everyone else was happy. But I've learned that I can't keep doing that. I can't keep putting others' needs above mine and my daughter's. It's time to prioritize what really matters. It's time to focus on us. For now, I'm staying at a friend's place. It's not ideal, but it's what I need right now. It's temporary, and I've been using this time to clear my head. I'm not in any rush to make decisions about the future. My main priority is rebuilding my relationship with my daughter, giving her the attention and love she deserves. I want her to know that she comes first, always. As for Addison, I'm not sure where she goes from here. I don't think I need to worry about it. I've done what I could for her, and it's clear that she doesn't value what we had. If anything, I hope she reflects on what she lost. But I won't be waiting around for an apology or any kind of explanation. I've moved on. I've spent the last few days trying to figure out where I go from here, and honestly, I feel freer than I have in a long time. I don't have to keep trying to please anyone. I don't have to apologize for choosing my daughter's well-being over everything else. I don't need anyone's validation. I'm doing what's best for us, and that's enough. I'm confident that as time passes, things will get better. There's a sense of clarity I've gained through all of this, and I think that's the most valuable lesson I could have learned. So I've made peace with my decision. I feel better about it now than I did when I first made the call. I'm focusing on the future, one where my daughter and I can grow, heal, and move forward without looking back. There's nothing left to do but to keep moving forward. Update 2. It's been a couple of weeks. I've had time to reflect, to breathe, and in a strange way to heal. But I can't lie, the process of moving on has been far from smooth. It's one thing to make a decision, but another entirely to live with it. The hardest part hasn't been dealing with Addison, though. That was a challenge, but rather with the quiet aftermath. The silence that comes after something big has been torn apart. It's unsettling. When I told Addison to leave, part of me hoped that it would be the end of it. I wanted to walk away, close that door behind me, and never look back. But life isn't that simple. The reality of what happened started to settle in more deeply, and I realized just how much I'd been ignoring in the past. Looking back at everything now, the whole situation with Addison feels like a fog I've only just begun to clear. I don't know why it took me so long to see what was right in front of me. Maybe I was just afraid of facing the truth, of confronting the discomfort that comes with realizing you've been living in a fantasy. The days after I asked Addison to leave were a blur of restless nights and long hours of reflection. At first, I thought the hardest part would be telling her that our relationship was over. But as it turned out, the hardest part was facing the aftermath, the empty space she left behind. Her things were still scattered around the house, when I came back to pick up some of my stuff. Clothes that no longer had meaning, jewelry, perfume, reminders of what we had and what we'd lost. I couldn't help but feel a pang in my chest as I boxed up the remnants of a life that had once seemed so sure. It felt like a death of sorts, like mourning a relationship, but it also felt like freedom, like I was shedding an old skin. And yet there was still the nagging feeling that I hadn't done enough, that maybe if I'd been more honest with her, more upfront with myself, we wouldn't have ended up here. But then again, I don't think it would have made a difference. The cracks had been there from the start, and I was the only one who hadn't been willing to see them. I had kept making excuses for her, telling myself that things would get better, that love was enough to fix everything. But it wasn't. I remember the first night I spent alone, really alone, in that house. It felt both strange and comforting. I wasn't sure what to do with myself. Part of me wanted to reach for my phone, call someone, talk to them, just to fill the silence with some sort of noise. But I didn't. I sat there in the dark, letting the quiet sink in. The house felt too big, too empty, too foreign. It was hard to grasp that everything had changed so suddenly. And yet, at the same time, I felt relief. There was no more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, no more wondering if things were ever going to get better. I could finally start to breathe again. The hardest part, though, was my daughter. I kept wondering how this was affecting her. How could I explain everything to her in a way that made sense? I knew she'd been picking up on the tension, the growing unease between me and Addison, but she hadn't asked many questions. She'd been quiet, withdrawn at times, but I couldn't blame her. I had to focus on making sure she felt safe, heard, and loved. And so, in the days that followed, I made an effort to spend time with her. No distractions, no work, just us. We went to the park, went for walks, even just sat at home and watched her favorite shows together. I wanted her to know that no matter what happened with Addison, I was there for her, and I would always put her first. But still, there were those moments, those difficult moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice. Was it too soon to move on? Was I being too harsh with Addison, too quick to sever the ties? There were days when doubt crept in, especially when I ran into people who didn't know the full story, people who didn't understand why things had ended the way they had. There was a part of me that wanted to explain it all to them, to justify my actions. But then I reminded myself that I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The truth was, no one could fully understand unless they'd been in my shoes. I didn't need their approval. I hadn't heard from Addison in a few days after that last conversation. I figured she was processing everything in her own way. But then one night she sent me a message, a short, cold text that read, "I found a place, I'll be gone by the weekend." That was it. No apologies, no attempt to explain her side of things, no plea for reconciliation. I was relieved, to be honest. I didn't want to drag this out any longer. It was over, and I was done. As the week passed, I found myself focusing more on the things that truly mattered. I started looking into new places to live, ones that would feel like home. A space just for me and my daughter. A fresh start. I also started working through the emotions that had been building up. The guilt I'd felt for not being able to make things work with Addison. The disappointment in myself for not being able to see the warning signs sooner. But also the relief, the sense of liberation that came with knowing I had made the right choice for my family, even if it didn't feel good in the moment. I realized that part of my hesitation in making the decision to leave Addison was that I was afraid of being alone again. I'd been married before, and after that ended, I swore I wouldn't ever put myself through that kind of heartbreak again. But then Addison came along, and I let myself believe that maybe this time would be different. I thought she was the one who would stick around, the one who would love me the way I deserved. But I was wrong. And while that hurt, I also understood that being alone wasn't the worst thing that could happen. In fact, it might be the best thing for me right now. I've been spending more time with my daughter, showing her that even though our family has changed, we are still strong. We are still a team. And slowly but surely, I've been picking up the pieces of my life. I'm not rushing anything, not relationships, not decisions, just taking it day by day. There are days when the sadness creeps in again, when I miss the idea of what could have been with Addison. But those moments are fleeting. What's more present now is the future I'm building with my daughter, the future where we are stronger, smarter, and more resilient than we were before. I'm not in any rush to get back out there. Relationships can wait. For now, I'm focused on healing, on growing, and on being the best version of myself. The rest will come when it's supposed to. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm on the right path. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I know I'm ready for whatever comes next. Because in the end, it's not about how fast you go or how smooth the journey is, it's about finding peace with yourself and the people who truly matter. And right now, that's enough for me.